All right. How about a convention of the states? Article 5 convention of the states. It's not been done before, but the largest nationwide movement to push for that is, well, it feels like they've got some wind in their sails. Mark Meckler is the president and co-founder of Convention of States Action. Joining me now. Mark, good morning. Welcome to have you on the program.
Good morning, Steve. Good to be with you.
All right. So the states are rising, you say. Now, what is, first of all, why would you think that now is the time? That's question one. And with Donald Trump headed back to the White House, what would be your demands, if you will, at a convention of states?
Look, now is the time because the people are rising up all across the country against the overreach of the federal government. People have had it. They know that we need a balanced budget amendment. They know that the federal government will never stop spending unless we force them to stop spending. They know that we need term limits. You look at McConnell and Pelosi and Schumer and all these folks that have worn out their welcome many years ago. They know that we need to return power to the states by doing away with things like the Department of Education and Energy and the EPA. And the only way we're going to get that stuff done is if we rise up, join together as states, which the Constitution gives us the right to do, and pass amendments that allow us to take this control back from the federal government. And I would say now is absolutely specifically the time because with Donald Trump going into the White House, that feeling is rising in America. And many members of the Trump administration have already expressed support for this idea, including J.D. Vance, Pete Hegseth, Brooke Rollins, who's going to be Ag Secretary, Mike Huckabee, who's going to be our ambassador to Israel, and many others in the administration are already supportive of the idea. So I think the moment is right now.
So, all right. So, a balanced budget amendment. These are some of the things that you want there. Here's the concern. You and I have talked about this. I'm sure you talk about this with lots of folks. The concern is if you go in with an open convention that everything's up for discussion. So you have to, some say you have to go in with a list of topics wanted to be discussed, 1, 2, 3, and that's it, and that's all that gets discussed. How does it play out? Tell the folks, first of all, what is an Article 5 convention, just for anybody that doesn't know, and then how do you control what gets discussed and what's off limits?
Sure. Article 5 refers to Article 5 of the United States Constitution. That lists the two ways that we can propose amendments to the Constitution. First is when 2/3 of both houses of Congress want to propose it. And that's how we've gotten all 27 amendments so far. The second way, put in the Constitution specifically to push back against federal tyranny, is when 2/3 of the states agree to come together in convention and have these discussions. And you're right about limiting what can be discussed. This call we're doing is not a call for an open convention. It's a call to discuss three subject matters. One is anything that would impose fiscal restraints on the federal government. We mentioned a balanced budget amendment, but it would include things like tax caps, spending caps, imposing generally accepted accounting principles on the federal government, anything else that would limit their ability to spend endlessly. Number two is anything that would impose term limits. And by that, I mean not just on Congress, but also on staffers and bureaucrats. What I call the Fauci Amendment. We never want to see another Dr. Fauci in the federal government for 40 years. And third, finally, and I think most importantly, anything that would limit the scope or power or jurisdiction of the federal government. By that, I mean telling them what they can't do, that they can't be involved in education or energy or healthcare or the environment, taking them back to something that resembles the original 17 enumerated powers in the Constitution.
And why is now the right time? And how do you get there? What is the procedure to make this happen?
Yeah, so from a process perspective, it takes 34 states, and each state has to pass a resolution in both houses of their state legislature. No governor's signature is necessary. It's a resolution, not legislation. So far, 19 of the requisite 34 states have done it. We've got 45 states now in session.
Is there a time limit? Is there a time limit? So if 19 states over 50 years say, let's do it, then by the time you get to state 34, then you're in.
Yeah, that's correct. There's no time limit. States can put time limits on their applications. Most states don't do that. So we have 19. I think by the end of this month, we're going to have 20 because right now, as we talk, there's a hearing set in South Dakota for this Friday. I think by the end of the month, we'll have South Dakota in the bag too. That'll take us to 20. Very close in Kansas will be 21. I think we end up this year with an additional 5 or 6 states. We're going to be around 26 out of the requisite 34 states by the end of this year.
Why can't you get states to move faster?
Yeah, it's just a slow process. It was meant by the framers to be a very slow process. They didn't want us to easily amend the Constitution. That's our foundational document. They wanted there to have to be millions of people to have consensus across 34 states. So it was built to be slow. And I can tell you from the hard work, the slog that it is out there in the legislatures, it is slow work.
All right, so 26 states by the end of this. So, I mean, are you a year away? Are you 2 years away? Are you 10 years away? Um,
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say exactly, but my hope is that by 2026, we hit the requisite number of states, and that would put us in convention by end of 26, early 27. That would be my current goal.
and what would that mean, do you think, um, on the race for president in 2028? What kind of an impact?
I think it would become the fundamental issue on the race for president in 2028. I know JD Vance is already a supporter. Look, the big goal here is to create a permanent legacy. President Trump's going to go in. I think he's going to do a lot of great stuff. We saw from Pete Hegseth's confirmation hearing and Pam Bondi and Marco Rubio. We're going to see good stuff out of this administration. All of that, and we've seen this over the last 4 years, all of it can be erased in 5 minutes of the next presidency. And what we want to do is make sure that a lot of this stuff gets cast in cement, that it's permanent, that we do away with the Department of Education, that we bring the power back to the states. They're talking about term limits. Congress will never impose term limits on itself. So I believe, especially with JD Vance there as the vice president and the likely next presidential candidate for the Republican Party, that this has a lot of capture right now.
Yeah, I think he's almost certain to be the next candidate for president for the Republicans. We'll see. Mr. Meckler, I give you credit. You're steadfast. You're determined. You don't give up. How long have you been doing this?
Over 10 years now.
Yeah, so you've been at it for a while, and a while to go. Mark Meckler, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Steve.
What do you guys think of that? Give me a note. Go to stevegruber.com. Drop me a note. What do you think of that? Is it the right thing? Convention of States, does it frighten you a little bit, or do you think it's the right thing to do? Go to stevegruber.com. Send me an email.